Hey, it's Jordan. I'm here with Sema Hernandez. You are mother of four down in Texas, I believe Houston, and you ran in the primary there against Beto O'Rourke. Obviously, he was victorious, but there's a lot of layers to that. I don't really want to start with Beto O'Rourke. We'll get to that, but I want to start with you because I was kind of impressed. You know, you only raised $10,000 compared to him when I think he raised $4 million. And you got quite a lot of votes. I mean, you got 246,000 votes. You won a lot of the kind of areas near the border, and the media kind of reacted. Beto was expected to win by a much larger margin over you. So, and I would say, including myself, I include myself with it. You didn't get a lot of media coverage. At all from my former network, the Young Turks, or anyone for that matter. So, what did you see when you were campaigning? What was resonating? Because the rate, I don't know what that is, but you were outspent a gazillion to one. You definitely connected.
Well, I can tell you that our campaign was completely grassroots. That I was outspent. We spent literally 0.1% to his budget. He spent about $4.6 million during the primary, and we spent about $4,000 campaigning. The other remainder was just to get on the ballot. So it was actually less than $10,000, but I campaigned on less than $4,000. And every weekend and sometimes every afternoon, sometimes even during the mornings, I would go out, at least in my Houston area, and campaign. But on the weekends, I would travel to different parts of Texas. And I came to find that there was a lot of roadblocks in my way because apparently he was already chosen to be the nominee, and I was shut out of a lot of areas, a lot of precincts, a lot of Democratic counties, a lot of clubs that did not invite me, did not include me. I wasn't even invited to the Democratic, the Texas Democratic Convention that we had here. I wasn't even approached. I still have yet to receive any kind of acknowledgement from the Texas Democratic Party as to what we were able to accomplish or what we did in Texas as a first-time candidate, a woman of color running in a race that was disproportionately, excluding me on purpose because they had already chosen the candidate. But what I saw campaigning in different places where people were not expecting me to be at, and again, this was word of mouth. This was grassroots. This was social media, completely under the radar. That people reached out to me and said, "Can you come out here to this place? I'll put you on the list. Even if it's at the bottom of the list, they won't know you. Or even if you just show up, I'll bring you up on stage because you're not getting enough coverage for the issues that you're supporting." We got a lot of props for what we did on our platform because it's plain as day. You can see it. You can look it up and see exactly what our campaign stood for. And we had a lot of Native American, Indigenous rights peoples that were coming up and saying, "You're the only one that's putting this on the platform in the state of Texas."
And you went to Standing Rock, am I correct?
I did not go to Standing Rock.
Okay.
I helped with the organizing efforts from Houston to Standing Rock.
Got it.
So I have a lot of friends that were here that got to travel. Yep. But because I'm a mom of four and I have little kids, and I couldn't easily just pick up and go. I had to prioritize and still organize in a way that best fit in my schedule and the priorities I was dealing with while still bringing attention to what was going on in Standing Rock. So that was a huge priority for me is recognizing that there are Indigenous people that are still suffering and that are not being recognized, at least not giving the federal recognition for the tribes that are here in the state of Texas. And that's important. The reason why they're not being recognized is because the oil industry is continuously fracking areas that are predominantly Indigenous areas where there's sacred grounds where people are buried. So this was important to them, and it was important to me. It's specifically important to me because no matter what pipeline there is coming through, whether it's North Dakota, whether it's New York or Georgia, they're all coming to my area, to my neighborhood. And I've said this before, I live 3 miles away from the oil refinery. Where we are at is in Pasadena, Texas, where it's the energy corridor of the United States. And if you go and look at the map, all of the pipelines are coming into my neighborhood. And that is something that I cared about because of the environmental justice, the lack of healthcare that we have here in Texas. The Congressional District 29 is one of the lowest, I guess the least covered when it comes to the ACA. We don't have the funds that we need. Our infrastructure is crumbling. We're continuously drowning in water with every rainfall. 2 inches, 3 inches of rain, we start to get flooded. We start to see the deterioration in our healthcare because of the exposure to the toxic chemicals. The lead that's in our water, I'm pretty sure there's so many chemicals in our water, but again, because there isn't adequate testing, or the testing is done in long periods of time, there isn't anything that is concentrated that you can say between this year and this year there's actually high levels of XYZ, whatever chromosomes or whatever, what is it, chromium 6 or lead poisoning, or just levels that are seeping from the oil refineries into our water filtration system. I know it's happening, but I don't have the funds, and the city of Pasadena, the city of Houston, all these other municipalities that are around here are not putting the time and effort to testing the water adequately. And there's cancer clusters here too.
And by the way, I mean, I covered the Trans-Pecos pipeline down there, and I was in Standing Rock several times. So if you think North Dakota is unregulated, go to Texas. Because
Yes.
Texas, they let big oil, fossil fuels do whatever. Actually, they basically run the government too, because all the Texas politicians are bought off there. It's interesting though, because you hear that Texas nationally, there's talk that, oh, it's moving, it's more purple now, or getting to be more purple, and some areas are more blue. And to me, the reason Beto O'Rourke even came close to winning is because he was kind of talking the talk like a progressive. His record clearly doesn't match that, which we'll talk about. So to me, it seems like actual progressive policies can gain an audience in Texas. Do you think, shoulda, coulda, woulda, but do you think if you would have had a shot, if you would have had media coverage, frankly, what you're describing, I've heard from Tim Canova and other places that within the state, it's rigged from the start. You get shut out of, Democratic Party meetings, events. You get essentially told that the decision's been made already, and they try to get you to drop out. What do you think would have happened if there would have been more awareness of your campaign?
Well, I think at the very least, and I hate dwelling on it so much, but I think at the very least they would have opened up the voting record to see where he really stood at. And it would have helped that he was a nominee, pushing him forward to adopt these progressive ideas and to start talking about it, not just in platitudes, but in context of how to get there, why it's important. And in the process of explaining the policy, it would have made sense to a lot of, Republican-leaning voters to understand that this is, yes, just about human rights, but it's also, it would help boost our economy when we're taking care of each other in this way that we're more productive. I think that would have resonated with a lot of people, and that's because I've come in contact with a lot of not just progressive, centrist Democrats, liberal Democrats, Republicans, gun-wielding Republicans that I've talked to about these important issues that they're very, they have very strong feelings about because of the certain way that they were brought up or how they view the world. And when I sit down and talk with them, I'm asking them why they feel this way. And then I start to peel away at those layers that get them to feel this way and understand that what you want, safety, security, a good home, a good paying job, clean water, clean air, an environment in which you can thrive in, is the same thing I want. But you can't just think of it as this is what you want as a person of a certain type of background. You have to think about it in the context as a person who is interconnected with so many people that whatever you do affects someone else. So let's think of it in the context of not just a white person helping white people or Latinos helping Latinos, it's us helping each other. And I think that if he would have taken that approach, which giving him Beto O'Rourke advice going forward after he won the primary and going into the general, I had asked him, I had told him, and there's video of this, occurring after the meeting that you're the nominee, you want to win. Don't go and talk about just Democrats and Republicans. You need to address society. You need to address human beings. You need to address people's humanity going forward. And that will be a game changer. And I was glad to see that he did take some of that advice going forward.
Right. Well, I think what's interesting about what you're saying is I think Bernie has been showing nationally that there's actually a lot of Republicans that are closet progressives. They just don't know it. You know, yeah. I remember on the campaign trail, I covered way more Trump rallies than is psychologically healthy. But I interviewed a lot of Trump supporters, and the first person they said, you know, when I asked who would you vote for if not Trump, was Bernie. And just in Texas, I interviewed a lot of gun-toting, Dick Cheney-loving conservatives that were really pissed off that their land was being seized via eminent domain to put a pipeline in their backyard. And I'm pretty sure that conservatives want to drink clean water too. So it seems like the Democratic Party strategy has basically been like, well, don't bother with them. You're never going to win them. When, like you said, when you talk their language, these policies, especially healthcare, I mean, 52% of people want Medicare for all now. I think that's in large part to a lot of the grassroots activism, but also Bernie's message that has gotten that more popular. Do you see that? Obviously, Texas is a traditional, cultural, I mean, they wanted to secede. It's not going like progressive tomorrow. But are you seeing, at least, forget the labels, that these policies that you're pushing have more wide support across party lines?
They do, and I know that people talk about it on a national stage, but when you bring it home to them and get them to understand why things they are the way they are, why they're continuously struggling to just make ends meet, and understand that if they were to get hurt tomorrow, could they still provide that roof over their head, that meal on that table, that Christmas present, because Christmas is coming in a few days? Would they see it differently? And of course, all of them support Medicare for all. They support the idea of having healthcare coverage. They're supporting basic ideas that support their way of life without them having to change much or struggle much. They don't want to pay more than they're already paying because they're already struggling. They call us the working poor for a reason. We're continuously poor and we're continuously working. We're stuck in this rut and this cycle because it was designed to be that way.
And you were running with no health care, right? You didn't have health care?
I still don't have health care.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no health care, and I haven't had health care for quite some time. Been very open about my healthcare struggles, whether it's reproductive health or whether it's what I've dealt with working in the healthcare industry, working as a patient care technician, studying to be a nurse. It's been a difficult thing for me to talk about because it gets very emotional. Because I've seen it firsthand, not only as a patient but as a caregiver for patients who are literally on their last breath, and I'm the one that's there holding their hand as they pass away from a preventable, treatable disease, chronic disorder that had, if we had health care the way that we are planning to have it, Medicare for all, this would have been prevented a long time ago. They wouldn't have to come to the ER and inquire so much debt on their family only for them to pass away, and the debt just lingers there for the family to struggle with.
And I want to ask, kind of peel back the onion, because you could share whatever you want, share what you don't want. But it seems to me, in reading up on what happened, you know, the progressives talk about the rigged system, but it almost seems like when things are being chosen, I don't want to say it's rigged, but there was some heavy-handed stuff, you know, like Justice Democrats, it seemed, whatever, if they don't want to pick certain people to be a Justice Democrat, that's their choice. But it seems like they were telling you to run for a lower office first, and I guess you didn't want to do that. So to me, it seems like, all right, even if an organization like Justice Democrats or Brand New Congress, maybe they choose somebody else, but why not at least give everyone a platform, whether it's putting out the information about candidates, whether it be, you know, I wasn't, when I was at the Young Turks, I wasn't really involved with Justice Democrats, but it seems like they chose their candidates and that was it, but didn't elevate or at least expose other candidates like yourself. So it wasn't just the Democratic Party of Texas, but you really didn't get much from independent media or Justice Democrats at least sharing that you were running.
Well, when I approached a member here locally who was working in conjunction to nominating Justice Democrats, a brand new Congress, I met with him. He nominated me, and I quickly went up to the top in the interview process. And in each process, each step, because there was steps involved, I let them know my name, my age, my background, and who I was planning to run against, who I was running against. And I said, I'm running against Ted Cruz. That happened at every single level, every single process. So when it got to the very, very top, which I was told the very top was Saycat, I can't pronounce his last name. He's Ocasio's campaign manager.
Shoycott, yeah.
Shoycott,
yeah.
Shoycott, okay. Well, he finally told me, great, we love your platform, we love where you're coming from. Pasadena is in Congressional District 29. We're going to endorse you to run for Congress for Congressional District 29. And I said, no, you're not. He said, why not? I said, because I already nominated someone and he's already on your slate for Congressional District 29. And I said, this whole time I've been telling every single person who has interviewed me that I'm going to run against Ted Cruz. And he said, well, would you consider running for a lower office? And I said, no, I'm not going to. Why should I have to run for a lower office? I said, well, because Beto O'Rourke's already running for that. What does that matter? What does that really matter? So then he said, would you consider running as a Republican? And I said, I'm sorry, I can't be a Republican. How I feel about things, what I represent, doesn't say Republican, and I can't not pretend to be a Republican. I can't. So he said, well, at this point, we're not going to endorse. I said, okay, that's great. I said, just so you know, I'm going to run with or without you. I said, it just makes me upset that you have held up this process for me because of the opportunity that was coming out of Justice Democrats for me to get that bigger and broader platform to talk about what is important here in Texas to working class people. And that's kind of where the rift started. They said they were going to stay out of the race, and I left it alone. But then when they brought on Beto O'Rourke on TYT, and I was notified by another activist, another friend here locally, they said Cenk Uygur just brought on Beto O'Rourke and was pushing him to be on the slate. That's when I got upset. Because if you're going to stay out of the race, then don't bring on my primary opponent and start pushing him forward. Especially when you haven't researched his record, you haven't researched where he comes from, and you're pushing him as a progressive, and you completely dismissed a woman of color, a working class woman of color, who's representing not just small issues, and representing big issues that no one wants to talk about because they're big taboos, especially in Texas. And since it's so red, you don't want to talk about that. But that's kind of where I left Justice Democrats. And they have great candidates that are running. Some of them I'm still in contact with. Some of them I still remain friends with. Some of them supported me through the entire campaign and even afterwards. I do understand that there was a rift between candidates that was caused because Cenk Uygur was bringing on Beto O'Rourke, because Beto O'Rourke was not signing on to HR 676. And there was a lot of pushback from candidates within Justice Democrats to not even bring him on board anymore.
The Medicare for All bill.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. And I'm not going to disclose which candidates they were. They will come out whenever and if they want to come out about it.
Well, it seems interesting to me because, I was never part of that, Justice Democrats, but it seems like they have a strategy to focus on winnable blue districts. They did run in some red districts, but by and large, I think they're looking at the Ocasio-Cortez model of take on, maybe an arrogant Democrat who's not paying attention, like Joe Crowley, grassroots organizing, and they did great. But it seems like maybe because it was Texas and red, and they thought it would be an uphill climb for someone to beat Ted Cruz, they just kind of dismissed it. That's kind of what I'm getting at. I don't want to get into the Young Turks for obvious reasons, but it seems that, at the very least, even if you as a organization favor the other candidate, at least give all of them a platform, is what I would say.
And they did this to other people. And someone had said, well, maybe it's because they're not running Senate candidates. I said, well, can you please explain to me Paula Swearengin and Joe Manchin? He's despicable. Ted Cruz is the most hated politician on both sides.
Maybe on planet Earth.
Staying out of the race because you don't think Ted Cruz is worth it. I said, why? He's worth it to a lot of us here in Texas because of the things that he's doing, how he supports Trump, the bills that he's pushing through. And it baffled me because if they didn't care that much about Texas, then why push my primary opponent when they told me they weren't going to even consider Texas anymore?
Right. And also, I think just your story, whatever, I mean, I can't get in their head and it is what it is, but just your story, mother of 4, you're a baseball coach, no health care. I mean, it seems to me like that would be such a contrast to somebody as repugnant as Ted Cruz, at least to give you a platform. And I include myself. I mean, at the time you were running, I was launching this and had a lot of personal stuff going on. But it just seems to me like, I remember in California too, they were pushing Allison Hartson very, very hard and not giving
David Hildebrand.
Right. At least an interview. It just seems to me like, why not?
Or Steve Jaffe, who was running against Pelosi.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I want to get into that because obviously I'm sure you're sitting here like with a grin on your face because Beto mania, draft Beto now. To me, some people are attacking me thinking it's a racial thing, but it's not. I just think he's Obama 2.0. I mean, I think this is very similar to, many people, including myself, were kind of hoodwinked by Obama in 2008. Beto has a lot of the same characteristics in terms of he's charismatic, kind of comes off like a little bit of that on the campaign trail. I don't want to say Bobby Kennedy mystique, but like something about him, you know? And I think just running against Ted Cruz, anyone could be charismatic at that point. But I was, during the campaign, it was not popular, but I did a piece for Status Quo because I looked it up and he was having fundraisers with fossil fuel lobbyists. And David Sirota just came out with a piece basically going very thoroughly through his voting record. So I'm not asking you to bash Beto, but I want to know from you because you met with him. I read about it. It seems that he was a little, deliberately standoffish about, well, I'm not, he even said at one point, according to you, that, I'm not going to do something just because it's popular and the people want it. And I was like stunned by that. What are your thoughts now that you're seeing this Beto mania?
I was stunned by it too. I honestly was because this was a few weeks after the primary ended. His campaign team immediately started calling people around me instead of calling me and talking with me directly. And I had someone from my staff call him and say, look, if you want to meet with her, you talk with her, you don't go around her. Because, you want to get to know me, then you come talk with me. I have nothing to hide. We finally talked. We met for an hour and a half, which initially they were going to give me 30 minutes over breakfast or over coffee. And I said, honestly, what we have to say as a campaign, as someone who represented, a 250,000 people, because there's still votes, precincts that weren't counted. You owe it to the people, and I owe it to them, to meet with you for more than 30 minutes and talk about the issues that are important and what we supported, what we continue to support, and what we want you to adopt going forward. So I gave him a list of everything that was on our platform in case he wasn't aware of it yet, because again, I was ignored by everyone. I would imagine he wouldn't know what was going on in my campaign at all. And I told him a lot of things, but what stunned me the most is the fact that he said he wasn't going to sign on to Medicare for All, HR 676. He doesn't care how popular it was, but he's not signing on to it. And he had told me that National Nurses United supports Senate Bill 1804. I said, yes, but they also support HR 676, and you are in the House in a position to vote for it now, to co-sponsor it, to sign it, to push your colleagues in Congress to sign it.
He might not be aware that Roseanne DeMauro with National Nurses United has been like leading the charge. They've been one of the leaders of the charge for Medicare for All.
Right. So I said it's easy for you to say, oh, I support Medicare for All or single payer. I said, but it's more believable and we will trust you more if you sign on to it while you're in the House, because it would be just an easy transition to support it when you're in the Senate. So if you're going to talk the talk, then you need to walk the walk. And he said that he called Sanders, or the Sanders campaign, the Sanders team in the Senate, and asked for permission to take some of the language of the Senate Bill 1804 and put it into HR 676. And I had spoken with Rokana a few months ago, and he said that the purpose of the single payer or Medicare for All caucus is to make sure it's not diluted in the process. So whenever O'Rourke told me that Sanders did not agree to that, I said, well, you understand that Medicare for All, HR 676, written by John Conyers, that to us, to all of us, is the gold standard for healthcare. And that's what we support. And we're hoping that that bill gets pushed through in Congress and it goes to the Senate and there's revisions made, and hopefully there isn't any, and it gets signed. If not by this president, by whatever president's coming up. Because we have an understanding that it's more than likely not going to get signed onto by Trump. But at least make strides to show that you mean what you say. And when I heard that, I was just baffled, and I completely left myself in a sense, and I said, how is it that you can deny someone health care and you have it? You have no idea what it's like to live without it, to suffer in pain, and someone who has acquired a lot of debt, trying to figure out what's wrong with me and my health, wondering if I have fibromyalgia or multiple sclerosis, because I've had 2 TIAs, which are transient ischemic attacks or mini strokes, and I'm still functioning. That to me is phenomenal, but it also tells me what my brain is able to do and regenerate itself. And dealing with my healthcare, with my children's healthcare, with my neighbors, people that I meet down the street. There's a woman who walks her kids to school every day with her chemotherapy, and she has no hair, and she's still out there fighting. I can only imagine what they're going through, but this person is denying healthcare. It's important going forward for anyone who's running for office to take these matters seriously and think about what their life would be like if they didn't have it, if they went without it, if they didn't have a living wage, if they're literally living paycheck to paycheck, wondering when their house is going to get taken away. These are important issues. So it's when I sat with him for an hour and a half discussing this, it almost felt like he was pushing back, and I kept pushing back. But I've always maintained eye contact during the entire interview, and he only made eye contact with me whenever he was speaking to me, not necessarily when I was talking. I would have liked for him to adopt every single issue, but even after that meeting, we kept in contact. He wanted to make sure that I still had availability to talk with him about certain issues if he ever hits a bump in the road, or for me to call him and correct him when he's doing something wrong or something that seems inappropriate or something that he needs advice on. So sometimes I pick up the phone and I would text him or I would call him and get a hold of his campaign team. And I would say, you know, this is important. When are you going to sign on to Medicare for All? So finally reached a middle ground where he said, I'll support it in the Senate. And I said, that really doesn't give me much to go on, but if you're saying you're supporting Senate Bill 1804 and you're going to sign on to it whenever you get to the Senate, should you win the election, then I'll go ahead and write my letter of support on that. But I did it late in the game. I did it in September. I didn't do it right away. And I certainly didn't support him immediately because I needed certain conditions from our platform to transfer over to his. And if the only thing I could get was Senate Bill 1804 to get behind him on that issue alone, then that's what I did. Because obviously we wanted Cruz gone. And that's what we agreed on, that we want Ted Cruz gone and Senate Bill 1804.
Well, you know, a lot of people who, especially me and journalists who critically covered Hillary Clinton, were accused of being sexist. So let me have an equal standard. I think Beto O'Rourke's record is just as kind of the talk doesn't match the record as Hillary Clinton, minus the warmongering, because he wasn't Secretary of State. He didn't vote for Iraq. But he is fairly, into war, too. It seems to me that he's taken over $1 million from Wall Street in a relatively short career. He's taken over $500,000 from oil and gas in a short congressional career. There's been reporting that he didn't, technically he didn't take corporate PAC money, but he did take money from fossil fuel executives. So, of course, because we have a corporate media that just invents whatever narrative they want, it's been kind of invented in CNN and the New York Times that he's like the new progressive thing. But his record is just as kind of moderate to conservative to me as Hillary Clinton. The only thing different is he hasn't been in office or in public life as long as her, but it just can't, he voted with Trump 30% of the time.
Well, when you look at our campaign and what we did, we pointed out all of these things that David Sirota has published, all these things that you've talked about with his record. We talked about that in our campaign with drawing the difference between O'Rourke and myself in the primary, and no one cared to air it. No one cared to report on it because the narrative was already constructed, and a lot of people are now feeling kind of heartbroken. They might have buyer's remorse because had there been a debate, had there been an actual constructive media coverage between the both of us, or actually there was three of us. There was him, myself, and Edward Kimbrough, who were all in the primary, and it's unfair not to mention him. But Kimbrough and I didn't get any media coverage. So we have a woman of color and a man of color, both being ignored in the state of Texas because they're preferring Beto O'Rourke. So 2 people of color were ignored in the coverage, in the press. Had there been more coverage, then things would have been differently. But all of these things that are not being reported about his voting record, that's what we talked about during our campaign. We talked about it because it was important to understand how can we expect someone to vote in our favor when their record says otherwise. And I'm glad it's now being talked about. But at the same time, you build up a person so much because he's better than Cruz or because he's better than Trump. You start diluting, you start just oppressing what the real issues are, what the platform is. You start ignoring what's wrong with our society, what's wrong with our environment and our healthcare, our broken infrastructure, our broken economy. It starts to affect the way we see the narrative in politics, where they prioritize name recognition and how much money they can raise, instead of prioritizing what the people are going through, how much they're suffering. So I did see that coverage, but I'm glad the voting record is being talked about. Now, if we can only talk about people's voting records for the presidential race and put them out there for everyone to see, and so everyone can I guess kind of put it like a flow chart, where you have candidates and the issues that they support and how they voted in the past. That could possibly help change the narrative going forward, not just in Texas, but nationally, on how candidates are elected or how they're being screened.
Well, I think a lot of people also don't know he was one of the Democrats that voted for this ridiculous defense budget of $700-something million. Twice. I don't know if he ultimately, I don't know if he voted on it or if there was a vote, but I do know that he was kind of wish-washy on the TPP and wouldn't give a straight answer. And NAFTA hasn't done wonders for your area and Mexico, that's for sure. But bigger picture for a next time, because I have a feeling, I see a little persistence in you, so I have a feeling someone like you is not done. How does somebody like you, who's just a mother of 4, how do people together, I don't know about unrigging the system, because there's a lot of layers, but how do you demand the attention? Because I think that one reason Ocasio-Cortez did so well, she outworked him, she had a message, great campaign, but she also got some decent coverage. You started seeing before the campaign, towards the end, profiles of her in certain magazines, obviously the Young Turks, other things. How do we make sure that in 2019 and 2020? Because to me, I mean, you have such a great story, and frankly, such a human story. I mean, you're talking about your struggles with healthcare, and the people that are running should be the ones that are living it themselves. I mean, Beto O'Rourke, I'm not attacking him, he's a wealthy man. He's a very wealthy man. And most of our politicians are very wealthy men and women. So it makes sense that you have somebody saying, which, well, I'm not going to go for it even if it's the most popular thing, which is kind of what a representative democracy is supposed to be about.
Well, I can tell you this next race, we actually started planning this next race March 7th after the primary. So when I met with O'Rourke on March 31st, and he asked me, so what's next for you, Sema? I said, I'm running again, John Cornyn, so be prepared, be aware. And I wanted him to be the first one to know outside of our campaign team that I was running against John Cornyn, because that's me drawing the line in the sand. That's me letting him know that I'm serious. I've been serious about this the whole time. I didn't get into this thinking, oh, well, maybe I'll win. No, I got in this race to win because we need to win. A win for someone in the working class is a win for all of us because it elevates our voices. It completely changes the narrative that not just wealthy politicians, polished politicians can win, but everyday people, struggling people can win, and the message resonates because they live in the struggle every single day. Going forward, I know that I'm going to be completely blacklisted from Justice Democrats, and it's great that they won as many victories as they did. I think after all the candidates that they endorsed and that they helped, only 6, maybe 7 won. When you look at our revolution, how many victories they had. And it wasn't just in a congressional level, it was from the bottom up, because that's how change happens. That's how we change politics, that's how we change narrative. So we start small, we start local, and we move our way up. It's kind of unfair to compare the district that Ocasio won in to the state of Texas. It's a district, it's a blue district against a corporate Democrat, and I was running a statewide race. From Houston to El Paso, it's a 13-hour drive, and I drove that to and from San Antonio, Dallas, Rio Grande Valley, in so many places in between. It's a lot of miles for someone to do on their own and still come home at 4 o'clock in the morning and pack a lunch and get the kids ready for school and take them to school Monday morning, and then get a few more hours of sleep and go back out there campaigning. There's no doubt that each candidate works their asses off to get elected. But I know that this next time around, I will not be ignored. Our campaign, our message, the people that are going to be on this campaign will not be ignored. And I'm glad to have the support of, and I know this is going to surprise a lot of people, but after I wrote that letter of support for O'Rourke on Senate Bill 1804 that he would support it, and I encouraged Texas voters to talk with him because he was being receptive in his race against Ted Cruz in the general. Beto O'Rourke pulled me up on stage and he gave me credit for the entire race as far as pushing the narrative. What was the words that he said? I believe the words that he said were forcing the conversation that we haven't had in a long time in Texas. And he brought me up on stage that I'm not elected in office yet, but I will be soon. And that, because I had just told him I'm running against John Cornyn again in September, and he did that. So that's kind of like a soft endorsement going forward. But I wanted to make sure that he knew, because I was counting, we were all hoping that he would win against Ted Cruz. Because honestly, anything is better than Ted Cruz. Anyone is better than Ted Cruz. But if he would have won there and I would go up against John Cornyn and win John Cornyn's seat. That's two people, and keeping the pressure on him to stay honest and be a progressive. I did see a lot of change in him as time went on, because I started seeing him be more human, to talk about issues with such passion, and that was great. He owned up to his own white privilege, and that was great. I'm sure it took a lot of pressure from a lot of people to put him in that position to own up to it. So that was great on his part.
Well, you won't be ignored by me, little old me. So better late than never, but I would hope you could keep in touch and let us know what's going on in the campaign. I mean, I think Texas is a real. It's not the full country, but I think it's definitely shifting a little bit, and I think candidates like you need to be more publicly known. So.
Well, I'm glad to have this opportunity. I've also noticed every now and then I hear either Kyle Kulinski mention my name. After the primary, Kyle Kulinski and Jimmy Dore were talking about, did Texas progressives lose in Texas? And Kyle Kulinski finally said that he was a bit wishy-washy on Beto, but there was a more progressive person running, and he mentioned my name, which was great. That was the first time I ever heard him utter my name. And of course, then Stephanie from the Jimmy Dore show, The Miserable Liberal, again mentioned me a few days ago. And Jimmy Dore also acknowledged that I was the real deal, and Texas really missed out on what we were doing. Lee Camp was the first one, besides Tim Black, but on a more national, international level, Lee Camp was ahead of a lot of people, giving me that interview and asking me a lot of questions that I had not been asked before, but I had been preparing as far as policy issues and talking about it further, expanding further on those issues. I mean, I'm prepared. The people, not just in Texas, but across the nation, don't want just nice words. They want action. When I was with the Poor People's Campaign, and I did this after the primary was over, I wanted to get back to activism, because I know what I was doing was sort of activism work. It was more political and raising the issues and raising the bar technically in Texas for politics. But while I was with the Poor People's Campaign, we're protesting several key issues. One of them was healthcare, and one of them was ecological devastation that happens. And so I organized a protest, a sit-in, and we got arrested at the Texas Railroad Commission. And we were escorted out to the back, and we were sitting there for maybe about 40 minutes in handcuffs because we shut down the entire building. We didn't get any coverage. So when I see candidates, elected officials that are sitting in Pelosi's office, to me, I see it more of grandstanding. I'm like, you didn't get arrested. You didn't push the envelope. Like, we could do more. We could organize bigger. We can organize not just in that person's office, but in every office of every politician that is accepting oil money, any kind of energy lobbyist money, and shut them down to get them, to force them to sign on to these bills. Same thing with, organizing inside the Capitol in Austin. We had been organizing outside of the Capitol, and today I got union leaders from Fight for 15, the American Federation of Teachers. We got an organization of, what's it called? I think it's the Voice for Peace. It's a Jewish organization. They also work with Reverend Barber. We ended up occupying the rotunda in the Capitol. And everyone asked, no one's done this before. I said, well, I feel like we need to do it. So we all organized and we occupied. And we gave our list of demands to every single legislative office holder in that building because it needed to be addressed. We handed it over to the people for Dan Patrick's office, our governor. And I mean, we're just organizing. And organizing in a way that we're not talking about politicians. We're talking about the demands of the people and how we need to be listened to and how it needs to be addressed. If they want to keep legislating, want to keep this, but if they want to actually keep the peace. And we're doing it in such a peaceful way, an organized way. We're not lighting things on fire, but these are the proper steps to take in order to be heard. But I've been arrested at least 3 times in this year. And I wish more people would be willing to put not just political reputation on the line, but actually have more skin in the game going forward, because our lives are depending on it. We don't appreciate the grandstanding from pretend activists.
Well, I think that, I mean, I've been on the road enough and I've seen enough stories. I would never myself run because I guess I don't have the stomach for politics, but I would say I think the time for conversations is over. I think that once you're in Congress or the Senate, yeah, you do have to work and compromise here and there, but on a grassroots level, we don't need to talk anymore about fossil fuels and be diplomatic with these people. We need to, like you said, peacefully, but get in their way, because they are through their actions, and this includes people like Beto O'Rourke. He might be better than Ted Cruz, but that doesn't mean voting for things that continue to embolden fossil fuel companies, or voting for deregulation of Wall Street and all these things that harm your community and you.
Or encourage immigration policies that are inhumane and violate international law.
Yes, yes. So I think, for example, Ocasio-Cortez, I've said this publicly, I'm not criticizing her, but I mean, I think we're past the need for a committee. I think we need to start protesting these politicians' offices. You see after another mass shooting every other week now. Obviously, there's been 2, I believe, in Texas over the last few years. We see a play-by-play of what happened by the media. I don't see anybody outside these offices of politicians, including the Democrats. You have a great March for Our Lives rally, but one rally is not going to do it. So I think what you're talking about, this continued persistent effort, not by coalitions coming together, is really important. So yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. Anything else you want to get across?
Oh, well, I've stepped down from the Poor People's Campaign. I was the chair or co-chair here in Texas. I was chair for a very long time, organized coalitions.
I was gonna say, when do you have time to eat or go to the bathroom? You got 4 kids. You're doing all this.
Well, all of this, yes, but it's an organizing effort. I'm not the only one. There's a lot of great people that are doing it, and it's a collaborative effort. And what I'm hoping to build out of this is coalitions that are going to, one, support each other and lift each other's voices up instead of doing a lot of infighting, because that's what I found, that there's a lot of organizations that are fighting for the spotlight, when really we should be there to elevate the issues and elevate each other's voices on these issues. Again, I'm a mom, I'm a human being, I was an activist before I ran for office. And that's kind of where I'm always going to be as an activist and as a human being first. Being a politician was never the intention. It just seemed as if the moment that I decided to run, I was compelled to run because of the things that Ted Cruz was talking about during the debate with Sanders, talking about healthcare as if it's, oh, well, you want healthcare, well, get another job and afford it. It's not that easy. What that does is it starts deteriorating a family where both parents are working 2-3 jobs a week and the kids are put in daycare the whole time. You create a society where we're so desensitized from what family is supposed to be or how society functions in caring for one another. I have a lot of love for single parents. For parents that adopt children and for people that are struggling to keep their homes or just keep the heat on. You're already working 2-3 jobs. Students are working 2 to 3 jobs, and they're inundated by so much debt, by by a system that's designed to keep them working, keep their head down, that keeps them away from organizing and protesting the very system that oppresses them. So we got to continue pushing for these laws and changing the laws from local level, state level, national level, federal level, as much as we can, so that we can honestly have a better life in which we're not just struggling to survive, but we are literally thriving in.
Thank you for taking the time, and I do not think this will be the last time we speak. So I look forward to your ongoing campaign, and keep in touch.
All right, will do. Thank you.
Bye-bye.